Show on Off the Ball
with Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
You're very welcome along, as always, to the football show. Joe Molloy with you this evening. Later on, we're going to talk to Tim Vickery about South American football as Brazil and other South American countries start to undergo final preparations for the World Cup in Qatar. The final international window is on the way. In the meantime, I'll update you on Champions League scores. So we have Liverpool 1-1 at Anfield at home to Ajax. It was Mo Salah who opened the scoring, and Kudos equalised brilliantly for Ajax then just before the break, or on 27 minutes rather, another chance or two just before the break. So 1-1 at Anfield with about 48 minutes gone in that game. That's in Group A. In Group B, Bayer Leverkusen and Atletico are 0-0. Porto 0, Bruges 2. In Group C, we have Victor Pilsen 0, Inter Milan 2. That is a full time for you. Bayern Munich 1, Barcelona 0. They've taken the lead. That one is on in Munich. That goal has just gone in for Bayern this evening against Barcelona. And Spurs beaten this evening. Full-time results. Sporting Lisbon 2, Spurs 0 is where we are in Group D. Very happy to bring in Matt Slater of The Athletic. Matt, you're very welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, very well. I don't know if you're watching events at Anfield. I feel like on this show over here in Ireland, we've talked about the Queen far more than we ever expected to. But there were isolated boos, I think is how it's generally been reported. And I think there was an initial boo in the silence, and then the vast majority of the stadium almost tried to hush that person and said, quiet. And then another sustained few seconds of quiet, and then more isolated shouts, which is always so eminently easy to do as an individual when it's a minute silence. And referee, I think, figured after about 25-30 seconds of that, let's just wrap this thing up and move on. And in some ways, much ado about nothing, but I suspect you'll be seeing lots of headlines over the coming 24 hours and a discussion as to what it all means.
Yeah, I don't have any more to add. I think you're right. I think there will be a discussion about it. I haven't got a particularly strong view, I'm afraid, either way. Maybe a round of applause is the way to go. I don't know.
Well, the reason we have you on is that you've written a piece for The Athletic, and the headline is "Winning the Transfer Window More Fun Than Winning Football Matches." Caught the ice. Wanted to chat to you about the changing nature of the transfer window and where we are in 2022. Because you do say at one point in the article, and I haven't spent much time with young football fans. If you, like me, have spent much time with young football fans this summer, you'll be wondering if they actually prefer transfer talk to the matches. So it's kind of an interesting development. Talk to us.
Well, I mean, I could get them on if you like. I think they're watching the game downstairs. But I mean, look, I've been thinking about this for a while. Mainly that transfer talk really annoys me. I mean, obviously there are some really, really big transfers, and it makes the world go round, and it gets us all talking, and we're in the entertainment business. So yeah, I get that. And of course, if your club signs someone really, really good, it's really, really exciting. But it's more just the way we talk about them, the length we talk about them. It drags on a bit. Anyway, my thoughts were crystallized in particular this summer because my kids have reached an age where they know quite a lot now. I mean, they know more about the people that are playing tonight in the Champions League than I do, and it got me thinking about well, why and how, and I'd already written about FIFA, the power of the FIFA game and fantasy games, and it reminded me of conversations I had when I wrote those articles about gamification, this sort of concept that video games are kind of creeping into life, the way we shop, the way we rank things, qualification. There is this sense that certainly FIFA, the game, has really, really influenced the way an entire generation of fans think about the game, talk about the game, how they came to the game. It's very different to the way I came to the game. And all these thoughts were sort of buzzing around my head as I heard them arguing in the back of the car with unbelievable certainty that player X was better than player Y because in the game he objectively is. And that, I think, is the difference. Once upon a time, we used to round the pub, but we didn't really know. It was an opinion. But when they say it, they don't think it's an opinion. They think it's a fact because in the game, he's better.
Very interesting. They're in the right league if they're Premier League fans, because as your piece points out as well, the extent to which the Premier League is dominating at the moment is quite something unprecedented, really, I suppose. Premier League clubs, you say, spent £1.9 billion on new players in the transfer window just gone. That is more than Serie A, La Liga and the Bundesliga combined. It's only when you throw in Ligue 1 that those other four big leagues just nudge ahead of the Premier League, but only by a percentage point. So even when you throw in Ligue 1, Europe's top five leagues, the Premier League has spent 49% of this money, which is just extraordinary.
It is. The numbers are staggering. There was a whole raft of them that came out at the end of the window. I think Premier League clubs beat the net. They beat $1 billion in terms of a net spend for the first time. The summer window, we don't even wait for the January window. This year, this 2023 season will be the biggest spend by the Premier League. You just mentioned the huge disparity in spending between the Premier League and everybody else. The market is pretty much dried up everywhere else. I mean, because Barca and Real, Barca actually sort of did actually start spending this time, but many of the other big spenders in the last few seasons just aren't. And the reason for that, of course, is TV money. And just how the Premier League came through COVID much stronger than the rest of them. The international TV money is now just seeing the Premier League stretch off towards the hills. So there is a semi-serious point in my moan about transfer talk, in that why are we focusing so much? I mean, why us? I mean, like the media. I mean, my company will openly admit that transfer talk is good for business. Do we put too much store in transfers? Because the numbers suggest no. The better predictor of where you'll finish in the table is your wage bill, which is about how you kind of value players you already have. Whereas transfers, you're buying kind of hope and expectation. And it's not a fantastic way of predicting where you'll finish in the table. It's not bad, but just not as good as wages. And you start to think about, well, that makes sense, right? Because a good, successful team is tweaking as opposed to overhauling. And we've got lots of data going back years to suggest that, to demonstrate that. So I just sort of thought the modern fan seems to absolutely love transfer talk, knows much more about players, genuinely seems to think that the way that we rank players is objective, has a fantastic forum in terms of social media where they can bounce this stuff around and get instant feedback. So the way we're doing transfer talk has changed, but I also sort of think that we are still missing the point. And are we willfully missing the point? Because it is about selling hope and expectation. And that is what keeps the circus going.
Yes, it's a very happy delusion. Because you say even on The Athletic that on transfer deadline day that all the
massive
stories there are like lapping the other stories by a considerable distance. Because I'm certainly, I mean, everyone's different, I suppose, but of a persuasion whereby I just kind of roll my eyes at most transfer stories beyond the very big ones and almost think to myself, well, I'll read it when it's done, or I'll check in on transfer deadline day and see when it's all done. But so it would seem that even the slightest links, which invariably and so often come to nothing, people continually click on them week after week, year after year. This is the sugar morsels for fans.
Yeah, it is, and the more I sort of dug into it, it's not that unusual, right? I mean, when Italy was the biggest league in the 90s, they were obsessed with transfer talk. They still are. They're it's what Italians do on the beach. They read about transfers. You think about US sport. One of the biggest events is draft day.
Yeah.
At The Athletic, we have an entire team that spend all year working on the NFL draft, doing amazing reports on all the college players, the build up, what the teams need. It's a team that do it all year round. So the football fans that I'm kind of upset about, like my kids, or not upset, but kind of, can you just turn it in? I mean, it's just an opinion, right? It's not a fact what you've just said. They are not that unusual.
No.
And I think I spoke to various academics for the piece, and I think one of them put it brilliantly. And he is a labour market expert. He's an economics professor. And he said, look, if you focus on a particular single transfer, it can seem irrational. You can sort of say, well, they've overpaid, right? It doesn't make any sense. That player's good, but are they 60 million euros good? No, they had some guys in the academy that might have filled that role. We won't know, right? But the actual overall spending is rational because the clubs are handed the money by media companies to create the show. And what creates show and hope and expectation? What gets people through the turnstiles and paying for their TV subscriptions? Hope. And transfer spending is fantastic at hope and expectation. And that is why I get this idea sometimes that some fans, certainly 12, 13, 14-year-old fans, almost prefer that bit.
Yeah.
They prefer that bit because nothing's gone wrong yet. And it's perfect, isn't it? The team is perfect.
Yeah. No, it is. It's because like football changes with each generation, and like the next generation up are dealing with it in a totally different way, as you've said to you and I. So, for instance, and I mean, I'm getting you to hang your kids out here.
I'll have to get them.
They'll never see this. They'll never see this. So, when they're arguing in the back seat about a prospective transfer to their favourite team, or they're discussing, who's bought the better player, and they're saying, well, no, X is better than Y, and he's faster, and he's got better skill, or whatever the metrics on FIFA are. Have they gone a step further and said, well, actually, I took the time to watch 15 minutes of his highlight reel on YouTube and I have my own opinion, my own thoughts on him? Or is it very much, this is what FIFA says, this is what the metrics say, and so my data beats your data?
No, it is both now. They are doing that little bit of research. Okay. And again, that's a very modern thing, right? And you're right, it is the clips. It's the clips thing that they love. And that's how they kind of watch all football these days.
Yeah.
So
it's a desperately poor standard of music in those clips by any standard, I would say. It's quite stunning. Well,
I mean, we're going to go off into a whole kind of gamification debate here. I agree with you on the clips, probably because they haven't paid the rights.
Yeah.
But how are people coming to music now? The way my kids come to music is, I heard this on FIFA.
TikTok.
Yeah. I mean, like kind of really good stuff. Like kind of, this song. Oh, I know this song. It's from FIFA. And I'm like, really? Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. And that's how people are now starting to, release music. But look, it's the game, the data from the game and the cheaper free games that they play on their mobile phones where they're sort of building fantasy teams constantly and playing them. That's how they kind of get a sense of who's good and who's not good, and this knowledge about the sort of second left back in Ajax or whatever.
Yeah.
That's how they're doing that. But then they are, when their club is linked with someone, and I've got Man United fans and Man City fans in my family, when they then go off and look for clips.
Okay.
Right? So one of the big rows was, did Liverpool overpay for Darwin Núñez versus how much Man United were paying for Anthony? Now that row that involved violence, and like I knew almost every angle of that from just the blazing row in the back seat, and then of course a bit of Haaland as well. I mean, I at least knew about Haaland. The other two, I'll be honest, I couldn't say I knew that much about them, apart from I've heard of them and I know what teams they used to play for.
And so would they have known them like even pre-Núñez or Anthony being linked to Manchester United, Liverpool, just via like FIFA and the game? Is it that kind of?
They'll say they did.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely convinced. I think the minute they see it on social media, they start to do the homework. They start to play as these players. They start to sort of form a picture of them, and then they're watching Goldbridge and whatever on Man United on YouTube and hearing more, and it's like, but within it happens really fast. This accumulation of knowledge.
It's amazing, isn't it? And like, by the way, this sounds like we're saying one approach is right and one's wrong. It's more just to observe how it's all changing, because each their own. But like, you think of Graham Souness on TalkSport and on his Monday show now, he'll be sitting there talking about Anthony and he'll be asked about him and he'll say, well, we've got to give him 20, 30 games, if not a season or two, to see what he's like, versus the next. Could you imagine the next generation listening to that going, what? That's not.
Honestly, they should get a 14-year-old on to just say, "What do you want about?"
Although
I know everything about this.
everything
guy.
about him. Although in a way, Souness is also right. Like what the
Yes,
14-year-old's
of
not
course
taking
he is.
into account as well as what's Anthony? Is he going to settle in Manchester?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
is he-
yeah.
You know, the physicality and all these various things. So it's just amazing how it has changed over not that long a time, like a decade ago even.
Oh, it's rapid, and you know, even when you work in it, you work in sort of media, you sort of think, I like to think I've vaguely got my finger on the pulse here.
Yeah.
The gamification element is alien to me, and it is. I mean, there's a theory that it's how soccer kind of eventually broke America, as opposed to sort of like the Cosmos and, you know, the World Cup in '94 and all that.
Yeah.
They really got it when particularly athletes, celebrity athletes, you know, from the other sports started to talk about FIFA, started to play FIFA. That is when it got into college dorms, and that's when you got this whole generation. And we can watch Premier League on Saturday mornings, and you know, suddenly you had this amazing amount of knowledge, and they were then able to play as their players. So there is this sort of theory that the video games were what did it in the end.
Wow, it's very interesting. I guess the other change which has happened in the relative recent past is the transfer window, and so we went from a point where we were ambushed with a transfer every now and then, and at certain points in the season unexpectedly, to, I guess, that frenzy of deadline day, and like it became its own entity and its own source of entertainment in itself.
Well, that's it. And the way we talk about it, like, can you win the transfer window? I mean, that is something that my kids and their generation, you know, genuinely seem to believe that you can objectively win it. But you're absolutely right. So the transfer window as a concept, it was a compromise with the European Union. You know, once upon a time, you know, clubs could buy players whenever they liked, really, up until I think there was a cutoff of about March-ish. But there was a sort of pushback against that, because there were obviously issues around the competitive integrity of the league. You know, teams could give up effectively and release players, and you know, you could be a very different team at the end of the season than you were at the beginning. So there was a sense, and I think lots of managers, you know, didn't like dissent or trouble in the changing room. So there was a sort of kind of pushback. No, let's get all our transfer business squeezed to the beginning of the season, and let's have a sort of a hard deadline. But that immediately then brings you up against one of the basic freedoms of the European Union, you know, kind of, well, who are you to tell me when I can change jobs? And that's a restraint of trade. So transfer windows were, I think it was about 2001, 2002, were a compromise with the European Union, that we would do about 16 weeks worth of you can change jobs, guys, and about 12 of those are going to be in the summer, in the off season. Then we're going to give you sort of a second chance in January. Now, that's how we've done it in Europe. There's a window open around the world every day of the year, by the way. You know, that's one of the other sort of fascinating things about transfer windows. Not everyone follows the European pattern, but I think that's intriguing, that what was intended to almost sort of dampen down transfer talk has just, you know, made it go completely nuts.
Yes, well,
and it's certainly,
who
in
could
terms of
forget
concept,
the scenes of fans waving dildos and gathering around Sky Sports? I mean, that was like the peak in some respects for the television age.
that was the peak, I think, of sort of transfer deadline day madness, which, again, if you think about where that came from, it was created by Sky Sports in this country, and I think it was heavily influenced by Draft Day. Now, Draft Day is genuinely impactful. It's very, very important. It makes and breaks franchises in US sport, because that is how you get talent. That is how the talent is distributed around the league.
There's a text in from Philip, who's listening here on 53106. We're talking about Matt Slater from The Athletic, who's written a piece about the ever-changing nature of the transfer window, and I suppose the interest and the way people are interested in transfers, the newer generations. So Philip agrees with you. Funny, he says, my 3 teenage lads know every player in all leagues. They rate players way differently to me, and they dismiss my opinions. They definitely love transfers too. Thanks, says Philip. You see, I think that the initial point, there's nothing unusual or new about his 3 teenage lads knowing way more than Philip and been way more into it, because when I was of a certain age and I was supporting Man United, honestly, I could tell you what Scholes was going to do before he was going to do it. Like, I just knew these players intimately, and I read everything about, and I was obsessed with them. So if I'd had the availability of technology, I would have gone just as deep. But I guess his point about how they rate players differently is very interesting, that it is stats based, it is influenced by FIFA and by clips, because the way I guess we're more of a similar generation in terms of how we would have talked about our football. The way, for instance, I would talk about like Raheem Sterling would be based on my eye and my feel, and I would say, I can tell you, like, he's a brilliant footballer. I just don't feel he's a great striker of a football, and I don't always trust him to finish a chance. I just that's my feel on it. And
sounds very reasonable to me.
It's a feel. Whereas if I'm just looking at him on FIFA, where no doubt he's very, very hot, and I'm just looking at the YouTube clips where I'm not seeing the misses, I'm just seeing the goals, then I could see a younger type going, nah, you're all wrong.
I'd add another element to that. There'll be people thinking, well, he's fantastic at fantasy as well.
Yeah,
he's a great fantasy player. Yeah. So you've got the gaming, you've got the clips, they're in the fantasy team. Suddenly, this player who you and I might have question marks about, based on what we're seeing with our eyes and sort of 30, 40 years of watching the game, they're not seeing that, or they're not seeing that immediately. That's not their first impression of this player.
Yes, first impression is the key point, because otherwise we're sitting here going, God, how great are we? And the younger generation don't get it. I'm sure they do. And as a matter of interest, are those younger people in your world, are they watching full 90-minute games?
But that's a really, really good point. Sometimes, but I don't think it's natural to them. I mean, certainly I've got 4 boys, right? And 3 of them are obsessed. They love football. I don't know if they would, unless it was Man United, because the two really keen ones are Man United fans. But I noticed that even a game doesn't hold their attention. They'll be on their phones, kind of seeing what's being said about the game. Yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same. But I've dragged them to games, right? So they probably sit through more than most, I think, of their generation. They go to more games. They go to more bad games as well, because I take them to bad football. Yeah. I don't think they're typical, but I think it's a really good question. Are younger fans watching 90 minutes?
Because it's hard to know. But then again, God, I mean, I wouldn't like to have my phone use during a match monitored either. So that could be
me too. Me
for
too.
all of us.
What's
been said for maybe a decade now with a certain confidence is that the younger generations as well will be less inclined to support teams and more so follow the marquee players. So the Messi Barcelona fans are now Messi PSG fans. Yeah. So you said your guys are Man United fans, and it's less about one player.
I've got two Uniteds, one City, one doesn't really care. So I think they've been loyal. I mean, they're pretty young, right? So they've been loyal to their team so far. One of them is a massive Ronaldo fan, huge Ronaldo fan. And one of the common rows in the family is between the United fan, who is sort of kind of, I think, a little bit older, and is reading more about how Ronaldo fits in the team and the impact that has on the team, and does he want to go, and the one who just doesn't want to hear that. The one who is looking at his stats from last year and saying, "Well, what are you on about? Yeah. He's our best player.
18 goals.
Yeah, and he's the GOAT, right? And he's won this many Ballon d'Ors and." What are you saying? Are you even a Man United fan? So that's so I can't see him going to Sporting Lisbon or wherever Ronaldo goes next. But his love for United is very, very entwined with his love for Ronaldo.
Well, the piece on The Athletic is called "Is Winning the Transfer Window More Fun Than Winning Football Matches?" This turned into more of a discussion about the Slater family.
My children, yeah. Sorry about that.
There is. I would suspect they're as perfect a case study as we need.
Yeah, I mean, I can't possibly comment. I feel like I should get them. I mean, they're watching the football, to be fair to them.
But you can show them this. And Slater, stop fighting in the back of the car, for God's sake.
I mean, to answer your question from a moment ago, they watched the goal show.
Right? It's funny, we were just talking about the Red Zone and all that. So the BT Champions League show.
Yeah, is that not the same in Ireland? But they watch the one where you flip around and you just see the goals.
We have BT here, so people would be very aware of it. I still feel like most would be watching Liverpool Ajax on Irish shores today, but the Champions League goals show is definitely
good.
It's made an inroad.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Cheers. Matt Slater there from The Athletic. And again, you can catch Matt's piece on The Athletic. It's still 1-1, by the way, between Liverpool and Ajax. I'll run you through all the other scores in a moment. Football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Watch every UEFA Champions League and Europa League match this season live on BT Sport.